Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on, it's gonna be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, July 31st, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast. We do pride ourselves on providing the news from the most award-winning journalism sites. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Daily Beast. Whatever extreme left or extreme right you get your views from, we simply don't do that. We just provide the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch your language. But let's be honest. In this day and age, words are going to fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too graphic for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So how do we usually start this? Well, the only way we can start this is, well, I guess we'll have to start with our Madam Vice President and hopeful Madam President Kamala Harris as they're trying to figure out her running mates. Well, one guy's already removed himself. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has removed himself in contention, saying that he wants to focus on his state and that Kamala Harris, as much as he would love to serve under the future Madam President, he says right now is not the right time for him to join the actual ticket, which only goes to show one of two things, because let's be honest, we have less than 100 days before the election. Madam Vice President Kamala Harris does have a lot of running up ground to make up for. She also has to pick a running mate very soon, which according to her camp should be as soon as next week. And like I said, we can't get what we really want, because I've said it before on this podcast, and I know it is a fool's dream. But at the same time, I would like to see a two black woman ticket, because like it was said to me a little bit earlier today, they'll ask black women to vote to put a white man in office, but dare are they scared of to put a black woman in office who could probably do the same job but better? Oh, how they got quiet. But like I said, a two black woman ticket would be a dream, but let's be honest, you're gonna Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is going to have to put in someone to appease the other side. Of course, there's always Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. There's still a few more out there, but like I said, we should have a finalization on who she picks as a running mate next week. But speaking of presidency, good old Joe is finally doing something which he should have done at the beginning of his first term. Be progressive, as in, doing something that I wish he should have done when it was told to him at the beginning of his term, which again, I'm getting at is he is calling for major reforms at the Supreme Court level, which again, better late than never, but he should have done it already.
Term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now: an extreme court that's proud of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come. By the way, these guys mean it. These guys mean it. Project 2025 is real. They mean it. Third.
Donald Trump, meantime, is.
So, again, what's so great about that is, guys, and this is the part that I really want to get to, the fact that we talked about for the longest time in this podcast, the dangerous scenarios that a conservative leaning Supreme Court can have. We've already seen it. They literally they struck down Roe versus Wade. They've killed the affirmative action version of college entrance exams, which basically killed DEI altogether across the country. What makes you think for 1 second that because these are judges, of course, as we've known throughout the time of its inception, anybody that's nominated to Supreme Court is a lifetime consignment, unless, they did something or they croak. However, I love what President Biden just suggested, something that should have been suggested a long time ago with the Supreme Court justices. You should have term limits, because right now the Supreme Court is kind of being made a mockery of by convicted felon Donald Trump. Every time he has a court case, what's the thing he always mentions? Oh, well, we get this up the Supreme Court, it's going to get heard. We all laughed it off. But what happened? 2 of his cases got heard by the Supreme Court. 1 of them ruled in his favor. And again, we're seeing other cases, which he's already been convicted of the Manhattan one. He's been convicted of the sexual battery one. And he's on, again, unless something happens in Florida, which we did cover, that Trump-appointed judge dismissed the case of him having a freaking storage container full of documents. Keep in mind, I will always keep saying that this man had a storage container. And I'm not talking a small U-Haul. I am talking one of those 20 to 30 foot containers that you can walk into, like a shipping container, full of documents he wasn't supposed to have. And that judge sat there and said, well, the special appointed counsel that was presiding over this was unconstitutional. The same special counsel that Trump and his lawyers asked for in this case. So I hope that gets overturned, because again, that's just one of many. The man has 43 counts. That's why I said, for a guy that wants to be 47 so bad, stick with number 43. That's what you got nailed with. So it amazes me so, getting back to the Supreme Court, that yes, they did play a part in this. At the same time, look at what it is right now. It is overly conservative. It is not balanced to where there's progressive and liberals on the other side. And at the same time, we are seeing that, yes, the highest court in the land is not infallible. It doesn't have an ethics code. Their ethics code is trust me, bro. Not when you got Clarence Thomas looking like the real Uncle Ruckus, who is mad because it's getting pointed out about him. But not just him, Alito too. These guys are getting wined and dined by Republican billionaires. At the same time, you don't think that what they do does not have any sort of impact on the way they rule. Of course it does. But at the same time, they don't have an ethics code. Their ethics code is more like an honor system. And I'm sorry, you cannot trust an honor system with the highest court in the land. So again, I love the fact of what Biden is proposing. He's proposing, along with the term limits, there's other things that were in there too. Constitutional amendment for stripping the president of immunity for crimes committed while in office. Sound familiar? Because that's what Trump is. Trump was overjoyed when the Supreme Court ruled that some acts done by the president while in office, he is immune from. We just basically told the highest position of power in the United States, you can be a dictator and not get tried for it. Biden wants to reverse that. He also wants to set term limits for Supreme Court justices, and also establishing an ethics court, an ethics clause to which the Supreme Court has to answer to somebody. Exactly what should have happened. But here's the problem with this, because it all sounds great. Do not get me wrong. It all sounds great. Here's the problem. You got to get that through Congress. The current Congress right now, I'm sorry, with Republicans still having a grip over the House, Democrats would have to come together in the Senate. And I'm sorry, I don't see that passing, because this is basically telling Republicans, oh, we're going to put term limits on your buddies in the court. We're going to put term limits on your buddies in the Supreme Court. and we're going to hold them to high ethical standards, they will shoot that down in a heartbeat. But again, the reason why I point this out, guys, is because this should have been done at the beginning of his term. When you had the House, when you had the Senate, you had the House by a slim majority, you had the Senate by a majority, you had everything going. And granted, there was the problem with Manchin and Sinema, your two renegade senators, because those are the two ones that play more Republican than Democrat. But he's now going on a progressive agenda because he knows he's not running again. He dropped out of the president. He dropped out of the run for a second term. He's going to pretty much hang it up after this year. But you really should have been progressive since Jump Street. If you're only here for one term, then in my opinion, and when you had the House, when you had the Senate, it literally should have been a progressive agenda that you could ramrod through Congress. And yes, you probably should have gotten more than just one Supreme Court pick of Kajani Brown Jackson in. That's just me. But I'll give it to Biden. You want to sit there and, it's easy to be progressive when, you're on your way out. That's all I'm saying. Speaking of things that are on the way out, Biden administration did announce a new lethal aid package for Ukraine that tops $1.7 billion. Now, for all those that are keeping score, we've already at this point are now passing the $4 to $5 billion mark for Ukraine. And I get it. Ukraine is still, I know it gets lost in the sauce. Ukraine is still fighting Russia. Russia is still trying to forcefully take Ukraine, and Ukraine is fighting back. This is still going on. So it amazes me so that the Biden administration is committing $1.5 million in new weapons and equipment, because let's be honest, nobody else is fighting this fight but us, and war is our business. At the same time, they're getting an additional $200 million on top of that for the U.S. Department of Defense stockpiles. So this is the problem that you're going to have when you're playing world police. That if you're on one side saying, hey, we can't get you guys minimum wage increases, we can't get you guys maternity, full maternity or paternity leave, we can't get you guys your Juneteenth federal holiday to where everybody has to acknowledge it, because they'll acknowledge 4th of July in a heartbeat. But well, we can't, make housing easier to afford or make homes easier to afford. We can't force the banks to pay more because they're too busy paying us. But we can help out another country by giving them billions of dollars in weapons. Tell me again how, this is, again, you would think conservatives would be praising this, which they're being very quiet on because it's not their war. Now, granted, we did step in as Ukraine tries to get NATO status, but at the same time, nobody else is calling out Russia. I just find that a little bit weird. At the same time, guys, it's like I said, it's going to be hard to sell this bill to Americans saying, hey, we need to go ahead and keep defending Ukraine. At the same time, Americans are like, well, what about us? And it's election season. It's a little hard. It's a little hard to make that swing play to make voters understand. That's all I'm saying. Moving right along, though, we get into the heart of the matter here for the news tonight, guys. It's just that, well, we talked about ever since Madam Vice President Kamala Harris had announced her candidacy for president as she's seeking the Democratic nomination. And it's really all but a swan song when she gets it. We talked about how quickly the fundraising started. We talked about that, Win with Women, Win with Black Women campaign started immediately after her declaration. We saw that Black men followed suit and also did their own fundraising. Therefore, and at this point, she's actually on fast track for the fastest raised amount of capital for any political candidate in history. So women did it, Black women did it. Black women did it, Black men did it, white women did it, and not to be left out of the fold, white men did it.
So VP heads to Atlanta to talk to Black voters. As you reported, white dudes gathered yesterday in her name. What can you tell us about that unusual gathering?
Yeah, Gabe, this was a little bit of a cheeky event, but 180,000 people tuned in, presumably mostly white dudes, to what was essentially a star-studded Zoom call, kind of a throwback to the COVID days, a parade of beige, as actor Bradley Whitford put it. There was the dude himself, Jeff Bridges, who played the dude in The Big Lebowski, Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker, Josh Gad, Josh Groban, Lance Bass from NSYNC, just a whole bunch of Hollywood royalty, in addition to about half of Kamala Harris's VP list, turned out on this call, which went 3.5 hours and raised over $4 million. And it was an interesting mix of self-deprecating jokes, saying buy our trucker hats, not the pointy hats that white men typically wear when they get together, making fun of the Klan, but also kind of a more serious conversation about how these white men don't want to be defined by the majority of white men who are with Donald Trump. That's been the backbone of Donald Trump's support. And they're hoping to kind of raise awareness of white men as a demographic, which is not really a group that we've talked about. It's just kind of been the default. And it's one that Democrats have not really paid attention to in the past. So, Harris is not going to win white men. That's definitely Trump's demographic. But if they can move even a little bit of a percentage point here or there, there's so many white men that it could really make a difference. And the $4 million that they raised out of this call won't hurt either.
So much of of politics, and we think of political rallies, and that's the traditional way to sense voter enthusiasm. We just saw Yamiche at that rally in Atlanta. What's going on with these Zoom meetups? Have there been more of them over the past several days? And does the Harris campaign expect to use that to their advantage more so than the Biden campaign did?
Yeah, absolutely, Gabe. It's a great point, because one of the first events that Harris did after Biden stepped aside and she stepped up was this Zoom call with Black women that just exploded. Over 100,000 people tuned in. They raised millions of dollars, totally unexpected by the organizers. Then there was a white woman call that raised $8.5 million and had also more than 100,000 people tuning in. I think all of this is a sign of the grassroots enthusiasm and energy for Kamala Harris. We haven't seen this kind of energy among Democrats since probably 2008 when Barack Obama ran. So all of these Democrats who were kind of tuned out or unsatisfied with Joe Biden are suddenly fired up. They want to get involved, and they're just rushing to whatever venue they can. So far that's been Zoom calls, but now the Harris campaign's job is to turn that into rallies, door knocking, and ultimately votes.
So what's crazy about this is this just goes to show you that once you actually listen to people, I know it was the battle of two old white dudes, but since Madam Vice President Harris came on the scene, everybody wants to be a part of it. And again, I'm not against it, because we had, and to the journalist's point, there hasn't been a buzz like this since President Obama first ran. And again, it was debonair, as suave as he could be. Also, to point this out, the white dudes for Kamala Harris did raise nearly $4 million. So, and again, they're using technology. It doesn't always have to be a venue. Sometimes Zoom calls, sometimes housing somewhere, or just using all technology to the best of your ability. Still great things. At the same time, I can't wait for the debate. The debate's going to be my favorite thing, but Trump's been kind of been dodging Kamala Harris. But although I don't have the video clip of it, I love that she actually said to Trump, if you got something to say it to my face. All I'm saying is Kendrick Lamar should have been playing after that. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, but before we get into what happened in Chicago with Trump, the American dream. I just talked about this, that we gave 1.7. We're about to give $1.7 billion in weapons to Ukraine. And the housing market is starting to look a little bit more distant for those that are wanting to have a piece of the American dream.
Fresh data shows the cost of becoming a homeowner is increasingly out of reach for many Americans. In 237 cities, a so-called starter home will now set you back at least $1 million. With us now, CNN's Mina Durson making her CNN News Central debut, the flagship morning show here at CNN. It's great to have you here.
So much.
$1 million is kind of a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I think, people can feel that around the country, that this number has surged in the last 5 years. I think back in 2019, there were 84 cities where $1 million was the average starter home, which is bad, but now it's up to 237. So feeling more and more out of reach, for people who are looking to get their first home. And this is a problem nationally, but it's really concentrated in these states. I mean, the usual suspects, we have California, New York, Florida, New Jersey. These are the coastal markets where, there's less inventory, there's higher building regulations, those things drive up costs. But you can see that, in these top 5 cities, the numbers have just nearly tripled, in the last 5 years of the homes that are starter homes, which is, the lower third of the market, things people could get into for their first purchase, really skyrocketing since 2019.
If you want to feel really bad, ask your parents, ask your grandparents what they paid
No.
for their first home, right? There's a big difference with $1 million besides just availability. Are there any reasons why the cost is so high?
Yeah, I mean, in the last few years, we've seen a number of factors drive up the real estate market. There's just the basic supply and demand. There's just limited numbers of homes on the market. And a lot of people, because the costs are higher, are looking for cheaper housing. So people who might have been buying something bigger or more expensive are now, they're all competing in the same pool for these starter homes. Pandemic, people were working from home. They were looking for more space. So that drove up the market. A lot of people were buying homes in the last, 4 years. And then the cost of getting into a home in general is more expensive. The Fed's been trying to fight inflation with hiking interest rates. So mortgages are a lot more costly for people these days. This has all, contributed to 76% of people do not think it's a good time to buy a home. Very low enthusiasm out there for home ownership these days. But, I think there are some signs of positivity out there. The market itself is becoming a little bit looser. There's more listings on the market this summer than there were, last summer. There's, that's a big jump, almost 24% more listings this summer. So it should soften up a little bit, but I think for the average person who's out there trying to buy something.
I love the fact that she was struggling to find good news, because I understand that was some cities that they showed, but the price of home ownership is fracking ridiculous. 1 million. There are homes out there, and I live in Tennessee. There are 2 and 3 bedroom homes that I've been around that technically would be in the mid $300,000 to $400,000 homes. They're now $600,000 and up, double the amount of what they're actually worth. But I love the fact that, what's caused this price to drive up? Greed. Who controls homes? Banks, land properties that come from up north and come down here and buy, especially here in the South. We've seen it. They've come down here. They've made these offers to homeowners. Homeowners have taken them. Homes and backyards get plowed down. Apartments get built up. Apartments with New York rent, because you do have those coming in from the West that are working from home, that have higher salaries. And let's be honest, it's a lot cheaper to live in Tennessee than it is in California. I will fully admit that. But that being said, in the fact that banks and those that control these homes and own these lands are freaking greedy. The average homeowner, think about this for a second. For you, for anybody will tell you, buying a home 101, you have to have at least 10% down, which means depending on the cost of the home, you have to have 10% of what the cost is. Could be $5,000, could be $15,000, it could be almost high as $25,000. But if this is going to be an entry-level home that's going to reach the 1 million mark, I don't know too many people that's going to have a down payment for that, and therefore makes home ownership almost damn near impossible. But here's what I'm saying, though, and again, this is my theory. My theory is they want to turn more homeowners into renters, because renters are forever cash cows. I hate renting. I'll be the first person to tell you I hate renting with a passion, because your money is basically you're basically contracting a house as a renter. It's like, hey, I'm paying here, I'm paying for the month. Here you go. For a whole month, I'm fine. Until next month, I'm paying again and again and again. And at the end of said lease, they may decide that, hey, we love that you were here, but we want you out because we don't want to renew your lease. And I hate that. And where does that money go that entire time you've been putting toward that home you're living in? Gone. Nothing to show for it. But if you're the person renting out the house, it's great for you. It's a steady stream of income. And that's what a lot of these development companies have figured out. They figured out that if we bulldoze these houses down and put up apartments or lofts or whatever, and we rent them out, you got to have a place to live. Nobody wants to live on the street. So of course, you're going to try to pay the least amount that you can live with. And good luck trying to find any place that's less than $1,000 these days. Some of them are 15, $2,000 and up. And again, what is driving this cost up? It's not supply and demand. It's fracking greed. It's the profits that they've seen from it. And I fear until there's been a great fall, those prices never come down. But with the Federal Reserve thinking of cutting rates, they always say thinking they're going to cut the rates. They're probably not, because again, they believe that holding the current interest rate will cool inflation. Hasn't worked for the last year, but again, these are people that supposedly know the system. Anyway, moving right along, guys, I want to cover this as well, because this is the reason why I say the conservatives are just useless people put in political areas getting paid for doing nothing. They are still investigating the Secret Service post their Lord and Savior, convicted felon Donald Trump, got grazed in the ear. And of course, the previous director of Secret Service, she did step down, and their new interim director, Ronald Rowe, is still taking questions. Yes, still taking questions about what happened to their Lord and Savior, convicted felon Trump.
Isn't the fact that a former president was shot, that a good American is dead, that other Americans were critically wounded, isn't that enough mission failure for you to say that the person who decided that that building should not be in the security perimeter probably ought to be stepped down?
Senator, I think you're using the word decided, and I think we need to allow the investigation play out to include.
So who did make the decision then? If it wasn't the lead site agent, who made the decision not to put that in the security perimeter?
You're zeroing in on one decision process. So I think I want to be neutral and make sure that we get to the bottom of it and interview everybody in order to determine if there was more than one person who perhaps exercised bad judgment.
Well, sure. My question is, why don't you relieve everybody of duty who made bad judgment? So yeah, you're right. I am zeroing in on somebody. I'm trying to find somebody who's accountable here.
And
you're telling me that the person who made the decision not to include this in the perimeter has not been relieved of duty? What about the person who's in charge of the interoperability of radio frequencies between local law enforcement and Secret Service? Has that person been relieved of duty?
No, Senator, because interoperability is a challenge, is a greater challenge than just one person. On that day, we had a counterpart system. It failed.
As the person who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance. And as opposed to zeroing in on one,
what more do you need to investigate to know
exactly what the decision-making process was? What more do you need to investigate
to know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable? I mean, what more do you need to know?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot.
A lot of people didn't do their jobs.
I cannot put my thumb on the scale. Otherwise,
what do you mean put your thumb on the scale?
You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure of the Secret Service.
Is it not prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days, just like you have.
Somebody
and I will tell you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity. and not rush to judgment and put people
I can't believe
unfairly
that you
persecuted.
are unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly,
We've got people
sir,
who are
we
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
You said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And you weren't involved in any of that? You were never involved in the decision making?
No, sir, I was not.
So again, this is the reason why I say that the GOP is pretty much a useless waste of space. There is an ongoing investigation going on. Yes, it is still going. Yes, it's going to take some time. Yes, we can't answer your questions as fast as we want to. Hence why they wanted somebody. They needed somebody as a scapegoat. Well, that's what the former director of Secret Service, she stepped down. Here is the acting one. And you're still acting as if he was the guy making all decisions. And Josh Hawley, I was like, if that is not an example of a chicken hawk, and I do mean a chicken hawk, you're going to grill somebody. Well, what about the person that did this? We don't, it's still an investigation. Well, what about the person that did that? They called this in. Still under investigation. Well, how come nobody's been fired? This is how I know I could not be a politician in that room. Look here, mother. It's still an investigation. That's all it is. I mean, we didn't come after you when you decided to rile up the crowd on January 6th and then you decided to pull a track star and run. We didn't come after you, did we? At the same time, guys, this is why I say it's a waste of time. But that's all the GOP has done since they took the House. Waste time with useless hearings. We should not be surprised by this. At the same time, yes, it did happen. Yes, convicted felon Donald Trump got shot. However you feel after that sentence is on you. But I'm just saying, I'm waiting on The Simpsons. That being said, guys, it's still ongoing. The one thing conservatives will simply not let go. Because again, this is what lets you go. This lets you know that they're doing the bidding favor. They're doing their bidding at the hands of their Lord and Savior, convicted felon Donald Trump. They are. Because he's directing them to basically go after them. No, someone grazed my ears. Someone should be fired. Sorrows and prayers. Sorrows and prayers. That being said about that Dorito, he actually, again, and this is things I keep pointing out, guys, that for those that want to vote for Trump should worry that he said whatever he says he actually means. Like he wants to end birthright citizenship, which for all those that don't know, he wants to do an executive order that if a child is born in the United States to parents who are not legalized citizens, that child born in the United States is not a citizen. That alone, outside of the 14th Amendment, is going to cause some issues because Trump seems to have this, hard on. And forgive me, that's the only words I can come up with at 9:33 at night. He seems to have this hard on for immigrants, illegal immigrants. Oh, they're sending the West from their prisons. They're sending the murderers, the rapists. They're sending them here. They're taking all the black jobs. I'm trying to tell you, this man really does believe the tinfoil brain that he has. And what should be scary about all this, what's really scary about all this, is that for the simple fact of the matter, he believes it. And again, that's just one of the many things he would do if given the chance, which again, we all should be worried about. Oh, but fear not. His vice president's way worse. And I know what I'm about to show is from the Megyn Kelly show. Yes, she's basically Ann Coulter. The white privilege just hasn't made her look older yet, but it's getting there. She talks about the fact that current VP hopeful JD Vance decided to single out women and people who have no kids, because they believe that if you are basically not a parent, you may not have the insight needed to run the country. I cannot make that up. And also, he called a bunch of women with no children childless cat ladies. Interesting that the man that changed his name, married an Indian woman, and yet somehow his wife is surprised that she's getting harassed by the same people she's voting from, and yet he doesn't understand. Again, bear with me. It's going to take a couple minutes.
Comments about the childless cat ladies. Watch.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Well, the Harris team recirculated the comments this week, leading Democrats and the media, the same media currently rewriting history to tell us Kamala Harris was never the border czar, to immediately pile on cue. On Tuesday, Hillary Clinton shared it on X and sarcastically wrote, "What a normal, relatable guy who certainly doesn't hate women having freedoms. Literally, your husband has been accused of repeated sexual assaults. So take a seat, madam." On Wednesday, actress Jennifer Aniston weighed in, writing, "I truly can't believe this is coming from a potential VP of the United States," and urged Senator Vance to think about his own daughter, hoping that she might never need IVF, which she accused Mr. Vance of being against, which, as we pointed out yesterday, is not true. And it did not end there. Watch.
How dare you? You never had a baby. Your wife had a baby. You know who else didn't have kids? George Washington, the father of our nation. Like Kamala, he raised Martha's children.
Because they invalidate even the idea of women who use IVF to get pregnant, or women who don't have children, or women who are stepmoms. Like, none of those are valid women to them. Those women don't matter. They're trying to reinforce this message that the only valid version of America is the America where white women didn't leave the home.
My kids are older. Does that make me childless? I want to qualify.
He is falling into the line of Donald Trump, offending women, offending minorities.
So if you have stepkids, JD Vance is saying that you should not have as many rights as everybody else. Like, this is a person, him and the former president, they want to control women. Jesus did not have children, right?
Joining me now, GOP vice presidential candidate, JD Vance. JD, Senator, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Megan. Thank you.
So Jesus didn't have kids, therefore you are wrong. What were you trying to say?
I guess they're comparing Kamala Harris to Jesus. I don't know. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me, Megan. But look, I know the media wants to attack me and wants me to back down on this, Megan. But the simple point that I made is that having children, becoming a father, becoming a mother, I really do think it changes your perspective in a pretty profound way. This is something, of course, we've recognized for hundreds of years in this country, that human civilization has always recognized. But there's a deeper point here, Megan. It's not a criticism of people who don't have children. I explicitly said in my remarks, despite the fact the media has lied about this, that this is not about criticizing people who, for various reasons, didn't have kids. This is about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family and anti-child. We have to ask ourselves, Megan, why do we have masking of toddlers years after the pandemic ended? Why do we have the Harris campaign coming out this very morning, Megan, and saying that we should not have the child tax credit, which lowers tax rates for parents of young children? It's because they have become anti-family and anti-kid. And I'm proud to stand up for parents. And I hope that parents out there recognize that I'm a guy who wants to fight for you. I want to fight for your interests. I want to fight for your stake in the country. And that is what this is fundamentally about. The Democrats in the past 5-10 years, Megyn, they have become anti-family. It's built into their policy. It's built into the way they talk about parents and children. And it's time that we called that out. I don't think we should back down from it, Megyn. I think we should be honest about the problem.
Here's what's crazy.
Okay, so let's stop it right there because Megyn Kelly is basically a piece of shit, and we've known that. But I love the fact that JD Vance, that's not his actual name, he changed it. They love going to their echo chambers. They'll go to Fox News, Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson. I don't know about Tucker Carlson now, but Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, they'll always go to these places. I like to call them safe zones for them. Because, you know, when they say something and say he called out the childless cat ladies, because he believes that, hey, well, when you're a parent, you just have a better perspective. You know, that does, you know, here's the thing. Running a country, whether you're trying to make the country better or not, being a parent or not a parent is indifferent. It really is. And at the same time, guys, like myself, I'm a parent. That's fine. That's my choice. I love my kids. I love the family I have. But if someone decides that, hey, I'm just not good family material, I don't want to be a father, I don't want to be a mother, they could still be an awesome asset in whatever seat that they do run for political office and be great at it. It doesn't change their perspective. You know, kind of like the way like Democrats wanted to push for free lunch and yet Republicans shot it down. And almost in every red state, free lunch is either being restricted or reduced or pretty much deducted. At the same time, Head Start, daycare vouchers, things of that nature in red states are being reduced. Food stamps are hard to get in the red states because basically they are the biggest welfare queens of the entire budget. And at the same time, education after school programs, vocational school training, all of that is going down in red states. And yet the GOP wants to sit there and say the Democrats have an anti-child policy. No. This is like I said, they love to go to their echo chambers. They love to go these places to where they can talk and it makes sense. And this is the one thing I wish so many times. There needs to be, and I wish the journalists that actually takes that interview these guys would do the same. There needs to be a fact checker so when they say something, it's the true or false, and they're immediately called out on it. But again, it's JD Vance. This is who that guy, that Butkus guy from 2 months ago would love to be if he couldn't kick a football. He's basically him. Believes that women should be nothing more than broodmares. Believe that they should remain as homemakers in the household, and believe that it should be the 1950s all over again. That's the current GOP that we're dealing with. That's JD Vance, a man that is conflicted, married to a Hindu woman, has a mixed baby, and yet running for a party that doesn't care for himself, his child, or his wife. Conflicted? Very. But again, this is who Trump picked, his rubber stamp seal of a VP. And speaking of that convicted felon, we're going to get to the heart of the matter of what we're going to show tonight. Because again, there's two people I'm mad at. I'm always mad at Trump for no matter what, because again, for showing how easily one man can destabilize an entire political system. At the same time, how easily he can bend the law, how he can bend everything to his will, and yet not be held accountable for it, and still managed to have a Trump, still managed to have a cult. At the same time, this man has decided to take on an invitation by the National Association of Black Journalists. I cannot make this up. But let's get to the intro before we get to what he actually said at said place.
Time in 5 years, former President Donald Trump is set to be in Chicago tomorrow.
He says he'll attend the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention. Our Andrew Ramos is live where the event will take place tomorrow. Andrew, the decision to host him did not go over well with some NABJ members.
That's right, Joe and Erica. And tonight, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists wants to make one thing clear, that this invitation to Trump was not an endorsement. It was something extended to both him and Vice President Kamala Harris. And despite it being a thing that goes back decades, they say that they are going to try to see what happens when he shows up to the conference tomorrow. When news broke that the National Association of Black Journalists would host former President Trump at their annual conference happening in Chicago this week, a fiery debate ensued online between members of the organization. While some journalists welcomed the idea of grilling the former president, others pushed back, flooding social media with frustration about the decision. It even led the co-chair for the convention, Karen Attiah, to step down. Journalist and NABJ member April Ryan called it a slap in the face to Black women journalists.
Are you going to include the Congressional Black Caucus?
Sharing this highlight reel of her contentious run-ins with Trump over the years.
You talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing.
I can understand how she feels disrespected. But I think in the end, it's really important for us as journalists not to be partisan.
Ava Thompson Greenwell is a journalism professor at Northwestern University who is also a member of NABJ. She sees the controversial panel conversation with Trump as an opportunity.
We need the journalist to hold his feet to the fire and to ask those difficult questions. So that's what I'm going to be looking for tomorrow.
A sentiment shared by NABJ President Ken Lemon, who says panelists will be fact-checking as the former president speaks.
For us as journalists, people who go into and have very uncomfortable conversations for the sake of our members, this is an important time.
While Vice President Harris has yet to confirm whether she will be in attendance for the 5-day conference, a source within the organization tells CBS News Chicago they are close to finalizing a possible virtual speaking engagement with the presumed Democratic presidential nominee. But was Trump expected to take the stage at noon here at the Hilton Chicago? A number of activist groups will be staging protests outside. Now, Mayor Brandon Johnson has said that despite him not agreeing with the former president, he will make sure that he has the security that he needs here tomorrow. That's the latest from here in the South Loop.
So again, I am a little bit miffed. Now, don't get me wrong, the National Association of Black Journalists do invite both candidates. Kamala Harris wasn't able to join. Now, she will be attending a former representative's funeral in Texas that we did cover last week. So she will be there. She did not take the invitation to go into the National Association of Black Journalists. Now, here's the thing. The reason why I'm annoyed at them because they're inviting Trump, because it seems a little too familiar.
President Donald Trump is trying to improve the White House's relationship with historically Black colleges and universities. In anticipation of a new executive order, Vice President Mike Pence and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos met with HBCU leaders Monday for a listening session. Many details of the order Trump is scheduled to sign Tuesday are under wraps, but CBS reports it will move the White House initiative on historically Black colleges and universities back under the White House's control. The initiative started with an executive order from President Jimmy Carter in 1980. It was designed to help Black colleges and universities expand and overcome discrimination. Currently, the Education Department runs it. HBCU leaders say returning it to the White House would give their schools more access to the president. The HBCU community asked former President Barack Obama to do this same thing, but according to Politico, they never heard back. But HBCU leaders don't have complete trust in Trump either. The Washington Post reports many advocates are skeptical.
So let me stop it right there because historically, that's what I want to get to. That initial picture of those HBCU let's just say suckers. I don't want to call them idiots because I don't know why these HBCU leaders and presidents decided to go to Trump at the time when he was president. Keep in mind, this was 6-7 years ago. I get it. You wanted to see about giving you a chance because that's what even that Sambo Steve Harvey talked about, well, let's just give the president a chance. He can't be that bad. Yes. This is, again, I will forever point this out. Convicted felon Donald Trump bankrupted a casino. Let me stress this again. That convicted felon bankrupted a casino, a place designed to print its own money, and he bankrupted one. That alone should be it right there. Once you run a casino into the ground in a bankruptcy, you cannot call yourself a successful businessman. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, this is the reason why I'm getting into it. Because those Black HBCU leaders thought they would get something and got nothing. $100 million promise that didn't go effing nowhere. And now, here we are at the National Association of Black Journalists, and let's just say, as we're playing it in entirety, hold on, it was definitely one to remember.
During election years of inviting journalists to discuss the policies and their impact with the candidates who are running for president and the impact of those policies, especially in Black communities. Former Presidents George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton have attended the NABJ conventions either as presidents or as presidential candidates in past years. NABJ is currently in conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris's team to schedule a Q&A either in person or virtually in September. As journalists, we use opportunities like these both to inform our reporting, but also to help voters understand the choices that they face in a consequential and historic election year. NABJ has partnered with PolitiFact to fact check this conversation in real time. You can access that feed on social media using the hashtag NABJFactCheck. Again, the hashtag is NABJFactCheck. We have a lot to get to, and we do not want to waste any time. So let's bring out the former president of the United States, the Republican nominee for president, former President Donald Trump. Thank you. How are you? How are you? Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe Black district attorneys. You've attacked Black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking Black supporters to vote for you, why should Black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the Black population of this country. I've done so much for the Black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for Black workers and Black entrepreneurs. I've done so much. And, you know, and I say this, historically, Black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke. And I saved them and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something was
Mr. President,
wrong.
I would love
I think
if you
it's
can
a
answer the
very
question
nasty
on your rhetoric
question.
and why you
I have
believe that
answered
Black
the
voters
question.
should trust you with another
I
4
have
years.
been the best president for the Black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President
That's
Johnson,
my
who signed the
answer.
Voting Rights
And
Act.
for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
Give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a Black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
Black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a Black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well, you told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are Black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking Black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a Black job, sir?
A Black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And
Mr. President,
they're taking the employment away from Black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the Black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking Black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with Black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
Sure.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts. And this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now. The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single Black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the Black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young Black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying the Black community probably as much or more.
So what do you do?
Than any.
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by Joe Biden. By the way, just if I might, I was running against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls. And then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history. And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, let's keep going and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight. A prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing what you say, let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him. And now we have to steer it toward him. But ultimately, it's the same because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient heating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the Black worker, the Black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr. President, can I ask you another question
Yes,
that is also impacting Black Americans?
and that's very clear now. Good.
I'm sorry?
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed Black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again,
they're going to be charging the officer? I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So can you get a little more specific back to the immunity question? Who would make those
Well, right now, for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime, or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine
you go after somebody and it's a very close call and it's very dangerous. And they have the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision, and sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So I want to follow up really quickly. I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of two people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case. And I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't, because he wasn't president at the time. And he had 50 years worth of documents. And they ruled that he was incompetent and therefore he shouldn't stand trial. And I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial, and yet he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
but they released him on the basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory, and therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We cover you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to different
I didn't
topics
notice you
now.
do any publicity on it at all. I won the case, the biggest case. This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where
Sir,
I have
if you
a
don't mind, I'd
hostile
love
judge.
we have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different
No,
topics.
excuse you.
if we
You're the
can.
one that held me up for 35 minutes, just so you understand.
If we can move on now to the state of the race, sir, I want to get back to the campaign. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He's not talking here about how great it is to be a parent. He's attacking what he says are the choices people are making to not have children. Did you know that he had these views about people who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate? And do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family oriented, and he thinks family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families. I know people with great families. I know people with very troubled families. And I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
But he's not just talking
Excuse
about
me.
families here.
And
He also
some of
says that
those
people that don't have children should get less votes than
That's
those
all
that
right.
do.
I'm just speaking for myself.
Is that your
and I
campaign
think
position?
I'm speaking for him too. He strongly believes in family, but I know people with great families. I know people with not great families that don't have a family. And the people without the family are far better. They're superior in many cases, okay? He's not saying they're not. What he's saying is that he thinks the family experience is a very important thing. It's a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that if you grow up and you grow older and you don't meet somebody that would be wonderful to meet and would have been good, that that's a bad thing. He's not saying that. My interpretation, you'll have to ask him actually, but my interpretation is he's strongly family oriented, but that doesn't mean if you don't have a family, there's something wrong with it.
Just one last point and then we'll move on. Just one of the bedrock principles of American life is one person, one vote. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before. I can tell you this. Right now, you have illegal aliens coming into our country, many from prisons and many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. I don't think they should have votes. They came into our country illegally,
People
and
who
they're
are only
taking the
American
vote away
citizens
from
are
all
allowed
of the
to vote,
people in
sir.
this room that have been here a long time, that have worked hard, that in many cases, and you'll see this happening, if I'm not elected, you're going to see it happening. If I am, you're not going to have any problem. But you're going to see it happening a long time. You're going to see the people in this room and people outside of this room are going to be losing their jobs, the people that have come into this country illegally.
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. So let's talk about J.D. Vance for a little bit. He's had some stumbles out of the gate. I don't know if you're hearing what we hear as reporters, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for him. Why did you choose J.D. Vance?
Why
did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too.
I chose him
everybody out there can, but it's
I'll
hard
tell
to
you
hear.
why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room. But you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. He's a very smart guy without the benefit of having a family that has contacts, like a father that was well connected. He got into Yale Law School. He graduated in 2 years from Ohio State, summa cum laude. I mean, you take a look at, his career has been an amazing career. He started off at a level with a difficult family situation, very difficult with the mother and the father and everything else. He ends up going to Yale Law School and was one of the top students, became the head of the law journal. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He's a 4-year, he was in the military with great distinction for 4 years, got out, went into business, became successful in business, very successful in business, actually, did public offerings and other things. And I have to believe in that. I mean, he's somebody that was born in a rough situation. Most of the people know that situation because it was very well documented in his book. And I have a lot of respect for somebody that can get into Yale and become one of the best students in Yale, that meets a young woman at Yale who was also outstanding, and they get married, they have a beautiful family. But he had he's made himself an amazing life. He then goes to Ohio, lives in Ohio, and he had my endorsement. That helped. But he wins the Senate. He becomes a United States Senator. So he's a United States Senator. And so, Harris, like I respect you for your success, I respect people for their success.
The reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We'd been together for much of that day. You left to go to Butler, Pennsylvania, and we didn't know what was next.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that,
I cannot understand your microphone.
I know
is so
it is
muffled.
really hard for me to
it's
understand you
just, I can understand you perfectly.
because she's closer.
I can understand you.
I'm happy to hear that, sir.
But I can't
Really happy to hear
understand,
that.
Harris,
I have a few more questions.
because of the distance, and the mics are really in lousy shape, but I cannot understand
So,
Are you asking a question?
what you're saying.
So what I wanted to say was the last time we spoke, you said some words that were prophetic because I asked you who you wanted to choose for vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would bring. You choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris. And that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice. When you look at J.D. Vance, is he ready on day one?
Does he what?
Ready on day one, if he has to be.
I've always had great respect for him, and for the other candidates too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented. Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered. Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons of what we're talking about, not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons. But historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think JD is. I think that all of them would have been, but you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
I'm going to get my JD Vance question in.
JD Vance?
I'm going to get my JD Vance question in. To your point and to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think, well, I mean, my point is here.
But at least it was said in a friendly manner.
My point is, do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what JD Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the death.
I think it's
they're
about
allowing
freedom,
the
right?
death of a baby after the baby is born, based on
Sir,
the
that's
governor of
illegal
Virginia.
in every state in the country.
Based on the governor of Virginia,
Executing a
they're
baby in
allowing the
every
death
state
of
in
the
the country
baby
is illegal.
after it's born. They're
It's a crime.
allowing abortions in the 8th and 9th month.
Well, Democrats have denied.
I think they're right. And I think the Republican Party is actually much less. I think I've made them much less radical, perhaps. But the Republican Party, what we're doing is bringing it back to the states where everybody wanted it. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservative, everybody wanted abortion brought back. They didn't want Roe v. Wade in the federal government. They wanted it, everybody.
But the
wanted
majority
it
of
back.
Americans oppose Roe v. Wade being overturned.
They
Multiple
don't know
polls have showed
about
that,
this.
sir.
Right now, they're voting. It brought it back to the states. Now, I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Ronald Reagan believed with rape, incest, life of the mother. I do. I think most people do. I think most Republicans do also. But if you take a look, right now they're doing, it's an amazing thing, out of the federal government, it's in states, and people are voting. And I will say, Ohio is, let's call it a more liberal version, has been approved. Kansas, the same thing, a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But the people are now voting, and it's taking this issue that's been going on for 52 years and has torn our country apart, and it's giving it to the people to vote on. And they're voting. And many states have already voted. Others are in the process of voting. And it's bringing it back to the people and a vote of the people. And it's not at all radical. And again, you have to follow your heart. I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Most people believe in the 3 exceptions. Most Republicans believe in the exceptions. But they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby. That's a radical, horrible position. And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people don't.
Thank you. Can I just pivot really quickly to another question about, you brought up health, Harris. You're an active man. We see you golfing all the time, but if you win, you'll still be president at 82, which is older than Biden is right now.
But not mentally. Look, mentally.
Here's the question.
He's shot. But most people.
Would you consider?
Most people. I know many people in their 80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history. The greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question. Would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated me.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That wasn't a question. She didn't ask me a question. She gave a statement. That wasn't a question.
I repeated your statement, sir, actually.
You said you would. You would.
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought
down.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
Well,
I took 2 of them. But let me ask you.
Yeah.
I would like to have people running for president. And I don't mean because they're 75 or 85. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it. People say it's not constitutional. I would like to have something passed where you can do it. I think we should know. I mean, I've watched what's happened in the last couple of years under this gentleman, and our country is a mess. We have inflation. We have the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. What he has done to our country, and her too, what they've done to our country, she has been a horrible vice president. She's considered the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Don't mean to interrupt you, but would you consider taking the cognitive test?
Mr. President.
I would love to
and
do
make
it.
it public.
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr. President, how do you intend to...
I suggested, Harris, that let's take one. I said, Joe and I will go and take a cognitive test. Now, I'd do it with her, too. I would do it with her also. You know what? She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass the cognitive test.
Mr. President,
are you saying she wouldn't pass? Just to be clear,
I'm just giving you the facts.
To be clear, you don't think Harris?
How do you intend?
She didn't pass her bar exam, and she didn't think she would pass it, and she didn't think she was going to have to pass it. And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it.
She did pass it.
There's a man over here. I think he must work.
Mr. President, I would love to ask you about January 6th. You've called yourself the candidate of law and order.
Yeah.
When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones. At least one officer lost an eye. One had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs. Another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red paint, red spray paint that will never actually come off, especially in the limestone. It will never, I'm a builder, I know about this stuff. It'll never, you'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our government. They fought with police. They fought with them much more openly than I saw on January 6th. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed that city?
But sir, my question is on those.
What's going to happen to the people that tried to
rioters who assaulted officers.
You have to
would you pardon
what's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You would pardon those?
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just they were convicted by a very tough system. How come the people that tried to burn down Minneapolis, how come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the people
But sir, we're
that,
talking about people that were
people,
seen
no,
beating
We're
officers
talking
with
about federal
flagpoles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on video. Have you seen that
Really?
video,
Oh,
sir?
really? Well, they
you would
shot-
pardon those. You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that. But people died in Seattle. Nobody died, but people died in
140
Minneapolis. You know,
officers
people died in
assaulted that
Minneapolis.
day.
And nothing happens, and nobody ever talks, and nothing happens to those people. But you went after the J6 people with a vengeance. And I'll tell you what about the cops that were, and I'm all for the police, as you know, but what about the police that are ushering everybody into the Capitol? Go in, go in, go in. What about that? Look, nothing is perfect in life, but you have people from Minneapolis, you have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C., they were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying. They were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them. And you can't have 2 systems of justice. That's why they went after me as a political opponent, because they felt they couldn't win without doing that. And we're going to win our cases and we're going to be vindicated. But I have to spend a lot of time on that and money. That's what they want. After the election, they won't care. Although in my case, I think they probably will, because the hatred is pretty deep. But I'll tell you, they went after me as a political opponent. That's never happened in our country before. And it sets a terrible, terrible precedent.
What do you do on day one if you win? What's your first thing?
What do? I close the border. And I do two things because I can do a lot of things simultaneously. I close the border. We don't want people coming in. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. They have to come in legally. We want people. I want people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. So when you say, what do I do? That, and I drill, baby, drill. I bring energy way down. I bring interest rates down. I bring inflation way down so people can buy bacon again, so people can buy a ham sandwich again, so that people can go to a restaurant and afford it. Because right now, people can't buy food. Your grocery bills are up 40, 50, 60%, right? She's agreeing to me. Oh, she's agreeing. Thank you. I like you very much.
Mr. President, I think we are.
But it's true. Your grocery bills are up. And then they're mandating that you buy an all-electric car. You know, Elon Musk endorsed me, and he's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. He's a smart guy. But I'm against everybody having an electric car, okay? I'm very much against that. You have to be able to, if you want a hybrid or if you want a gasoline-propelled car. But, you know, we have more liquid gold, gasoline, oil, under our feet than any other country. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any other country. I want to use it. I want to use what we have. I want to bring down prices, bring down costs, and I also have to stop the invasion. And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project 2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, very much. Great
Thank
honor.
you, Mr. President.
Well, if you've been listening, that was a shit show. It was a shit show. Again, I am just, this is what I'm mad about with what the National Association of Black Journalists do. And here is the problem that I keep coming back to. It's just that how Trump is handled. If you give this man a mic, if you give this man time, if you do not hold him to the fire, he will do what he always has done. He will basically be a repeating parrot. He will find anybody that questions him, he doesn't like them. Anybody that pats him, he loves him. He is literally an old man starving for attention. And if weaponized or being given back the powers of the presidential seat, will do exactly what we think he will do, which is basically wreck everything. And I love the fact that he talked about Ferris Hoffner. For all those who don't know, she is the current Stacey Dash on Fox News. Again, Fox News is not a news station. It is a propaganda entertainment state machine. You don't believe me? Look up Dominion. I'm still mad at them for not taking Fox News to court because they did have them by the balls, and they should have put that for all the world to see. But Donald Trump talked about, I've done more for black people since I did more for black people since Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, oldie but a goodie. We've heard that. I've done so many things. And yet, that was a perfect time for journalists to call him out on his BS. It should have been, what did you do? What have you done that is currently made better for black people? Because again, you're the National Association of Black Journalists. It is your job to hold these people to accountability. It is your job to ask tough questions. You should be asking Donald Trump, why is it that your tax cuts have done more for corporations than they've done for people? Because the tax breaks things that you have taken from the middle and lower class, you have given to the upper class. That is the reason why corporate profits have been soaring in an area where in an inflation type situation. Only corporations are showing profits right now. Or how come my groceries bill high? Again, you've given tax breaks and you've taken away from the middle and lower classes. That's why your rich friends are very happy with you. Black corporations are very happy with you because you've given the tax breaks that are still in effect ever since Biden took office. But they're not talking about that. At the same time, he talks about, I believe I should take a mental acuity test because I've taken 2 and I've aced them. I call BS on that. Well, if I become president, I'll be 1 year older than currently Biden, and I'll have all my mental facilities. And if something happens, I'll remove myself. No, you won't. Give it to Biden. Biden realized that, hey, I am too old to be doing this. Let me step down for this term. If Trump was given the same position, that idiot wouldn't blink an eye and still want to be and still remain president. So again, what did we learn from this nearly 45 minutes of Donald Trump speaking to the National Association of Black Journalists? That one, they had to get somebody from Fox News to get him to agree to go on to this thing. At the same time, he spoke to her more than he spoke to the other two correspondents there. Because again, he loves Fox News. Fox News basically does his bidding, much like the GOP does. And Trump hasn't said anything that he would do or policies that he would put in place to actually help Black people. You notice that in his whole 45-minute rant, he said he would do nothing except the greatest hits. Oh, I'll close down the border on day one. I will give pardons to all those that participated in all those terrorists that participated in the January 6th insurrection. I will make energy costs go way down. It's not a switch, sir. Or I will drill, baby, drill. Again, you will piss off the EPA. That's smart. But again, I'm just getting to the point, guys, of what I'm saying, that with him, there just seems to be this unending level of how low he will go to prove a point, to get his things done, to be in there, to, again, he's a con man. And of course, I'm mad at the National Association of Black Journalists, because you invited this POS and you did not put in the restrictions to hold him to the fire. You didn't call him out on his BS. You didn't call him on his record. You didn't sit there and say everything you've done has actually made it worse. You quadrupled the deficit faster than any president in history. The only people that love you are corporations and rich people. Your vice president is literally a male Nikki Haley. Literally. And at the same time, you still believe you're the best choice for America's president over Kamala Harris. And again, the NABJ had a golden opportunity and they fumbled it. Really shouldn't be surprised about that. But I play that in its entirety because, again, y'all should know this is what you're dealing with. This man basically will say anything he wants because he's not being held accountable. At the same time, it was a golden opportunity for it to happen. But last little bit of news I have, guys, before we get to our feel good segment, is that Apple has reached its first ever union contract with the Maryland store. It still has to be approved by the employees at the store. However, it's the first time you've heard union and a company like a corporation like Apple in the same sentence. Again, this is the thing that GOP hate. They hate unions. They rather bust them up. Look at Amazon. Amazon's doing their best to bust up those that want to form unions at the distribution centers. Even more so, they've even threatened to even shut down distribution centers. And I'll tell you one other person that would have loved to do it, because I can say that now, Michael Dell. Michael Dell, for all those who don't remember, there's this little computer company called Dell Technologies, to where we were told that if we ever talked about a union and the head honcho heard about it, he would shut down the site and move everything else to another city, another state. Why? Because he doesn't want unions. Imagine corporations that don't want unions for any other reason outside of the fact they like the way things are. It's like being in a right to work state. Right to work has nothing to do with the fact of you right to work. Right to work state has depressed wages, has very slow or low stagnant wages, have had more OSHA related accidents by workers, have actually had more worker comp cases done by any other state that has right to work. Right to work is pretty much the company's way of saying we can fire you for any reason outside discrimination. And even that if they wanted to. But that's the reason why unions are important. If you're not a part of a union, understand that union fought for rights that you enjoy right now. 40-day work week, 40-hour work week, PTO, benefits, insurance, even maternity leave. Although, again, maternity and paternity leave is not where it should be with how other countries do it. But again, we hope things will improve. But shout out to those shout out to those people out there in Maryland for being unionized. Hopefully, it will spread because, again, unions work. Now, with that being said, guys, we are going to move on to our feel-good segment because you know how the Frack We Got Here. We do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes make you use your faith in humanity, but hey, It's Wednesday, hump day. Tomorrow is Friday, which is Thursday. And we want to leave you guys out on a good note and some good vibrations. And how can we do that? By showing Team America at the USA Olympics, specifically, the GOAT has returned.
She doesn't even need to land this. She just needs to go for it.
This morning, a sigh of relief heard around the world.
Holy cow. Are you kidding me? Wow.
Superstar Simone Biles dominating in her Paris Olympic debut, shaking off an early injury. The 27-year-old gymnast limping, even crawling after hurting her calf during a warm-up.
She wouldn't be able to do what she did if it was too serious.
The 7-time Olympic medalist on what she calls a redemption tour after a challenging run in Tokyo, now again proving why she's the greatest of all time, powering through the pain to put Team USA at the top and qualify for 5 finals, including Thursday's all-around when Simone and U.S. teammate Suni Lee will battle for gold.
Yes.
But it's the pool where Team USA is already piling up the hardware.
America does go 1-2.
Tori Husk and Gretchen Walsh taking home gold and silver in the women's 100-meter butterfly.
I feel like I'm in shock right now. Like, I don't even know how to process it.
Full-time engineer Nick Fink tying for silver on the men's side in the 100 breaststroke, and superstar Katie Ledecky snagging bronze in the 400-meter freestyle against a familiar foe, Australia's Ariane Titmus, who took the gold. But it was this epic finish that had everyone talking.
The Americans get it done again.
Caleb Dressel topping the podium with his team in the 4x100-meter freestyle relay, cheered on by his wife Megan, their infant son August, and none other than Snoop Dogg. On the pitch, it was the U.S. women's soccer team advancing to the quarters with a dominant 4-1 win over Germany, and some of the biggest names in sports taking over the courts. Tennis phenom Coco Gauff cruising in straight sets on the clay. While Kevin Durant and LeBron James led the Stars and Stripes to an opening game rout over Serbia, the first win in Team USA's quest for their 5th straight gold in men's hoops. So, is this stacked roster the new dream team?
We're just trying to continue that legacy that they built back then and keep winning goals, man. That's our goal.
So we're going to say it again. Team USA off to a strong start, leading the early medal count.
Let's go.
Right there. Now let's look ahead to what to watch for today. US.
Okay, so I'll just leave it right there because, again, I just want to start with Simone Biles and U.S. gymnastics team actually winning the gold, the GOAT coming back after her issue at Tokyo and coming in strong at the Paris Olympic Games. And also to the men's gymnastics team have been getting down. Also track and field, which, again, we're looking forward to, too. Again, we root for everybody black. Just saying that, just pointing that out there. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. Thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know it's live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. Of course, myself, you can find me, Black_Spartan615 on the interwebs, pretty much everywhere. The only rule I have is, don't be weird. I like talking about everything, not just politics, but sports and all that other great jazz, especially the fact that they just call themselves, that's not that's the redemption team is not the dream team. Let's be honest. The dream team, the 92 NBA Olympic team could whoop the current team right now. Argue with me if you want to. But anyway, again, don't be weird. I don't want to block anybody. I don't want to, have to put you on a list just because, again, there's some creepy unsubs out there. Don't be weird. That's all I'm saying. At the same time, guys, please support the shows. Of course, How the Frack We Got Here can be found on YouTube and on Facebook and wherever podcasts can be heard or seen. My other podcast show called Get Bit Podcast, which is every Friday at 7 p.m., definitely can be found on Facebook and on YouTube and wherever podcasts can be heard or seen. A like, a share, and a follow costs nothing, guys, but it means the world to me because we cannot do this show without you. So definitely like, share, follow, tell people about it. I want these two shows to grow. And again, if I could make this my lifetime thing, if I could make this my livelihood, I really would. I do love talking about this. I'm very passionate about it. That also being said, guys, blurredstation.com it is the vehicle. It's the table we asked for. It is our Amazon, our Netflix, our Hulu Prime, to where content that we create, that we own, can be seen by people like us, people of color, and especially for nerds and blurs as well. Again, $10.99 to basically stream Blur, to stream Blur Station. If you are going to sign up for it, guys, please go to the Blur's Eye View Affinity membership, as you can see right there. Select me, Black Spartan, as the Affinity partner. I would certainly appreciate it. And again, enjoy the content there, the anime, the movies, television shows that are available there on Blur Station. Definitely check that out. Again, $10.99 a month. At 36 months, you actually get to own a piece of Blur Station. It's a lot easier than trying to basically pay for extreme shares of Hulu or Netflix or Amazon through E-Trade or Fidelity systems. And again, a lot easier to pay $10.99 a month for 36 months. Also, if you too are a content creator and want to see about getting your content to be seen on Blur Station, you first have to join as a member first. Once you have joined as a member, you'll be able to speak to the people behind the curtain. If it all works out, then your content will also be on blurstation.com and you own it. The only thing is that they do ask for a piece of the distribution, and honestly, that's not a bad deal when you think about it. To wrap this up, guys, we are less than 100 days from the election. I know for in Tennessee, voting for our in-state voting does begin tomorrow. So if you can, please vote. Please vote. Because hopefully you had a chance to look into the candidates you want to look into, see if they match your interests. But if you are in Tennessee area, it is voting day for us tomorrow, August 1st. So please get out there and please vote. And basically 100 days from now, guys, as we are about to decide who is going to be running, who is going to be serving as our next president, I cannot stress this enough. I know on the show we're supposed to be impartial as all get out, but I'm going to be honest. This is really a no-brainer. This really is. Kamala Harris has the expertise. She is qualified. At the same time, she could make history. I'm looking forward to the debate, honestly, between her and Trump, because if Trump ever decides to agree to one, trust me, he's going to try to pad the field. But I am stressing the fact, guys, that if you're not sure, please go to vote.org. I cannot stress this site enough. Vote.org to check your voter registration, to check where you can vote, to check exactly what you'll need. Because, again, if voting wasn't important, they would not be trying so hard to make it harder for you to vote. Please go to vote.org to check your status, get registered, because, again, you want no issues at these polls, because, trust me, the other side will be scheming. At the same time, guys, we can't put our heads in the sand anymore. We now have another. Who knew in this day in life, not only will we have voted in our first black president, we may vote in our first black woman president, and just woman president in general. Who knew in the same lifetime you'll be able to do two historic things? I am just saying, guys, get out there, do your homework, be registered to vote, and be ready. Mobilize and get others to join in. At the same time, if you are able to vote by mail, do vote by mail. Again, use every avenue available to you, but you cannot sit on the sidelines anymore. It's time to get in the game. That being said, guys, last thing I'll say about how the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better as society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right our wrongs by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first black woman into the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, and possibly electing our first black woman as the first, not only first Madam President, but the first black Madam President of America, hopefully. All these are great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go about our paychecks? Why are we electing different politicians, but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. I promise we'll get through this.